Welcome to Trailer Rewind. Every month we go back and look at a film that Pete and Andy talked about in their trailer picks from the regular show. We watch it and have a very spoilery discussion about it. Today, we're going to talk about Cake.
I made a list, and then I checked on the internet to see if they were different in Mexico.
This is a lot. Trying to sedate the small city? I think you have big problems.
Perceptivo.
I want you to verbalize to Nina how her suicide affected you.
She jumped off the freeway overpass, landed on a flatbed truck heading to Mexico. Her body got stuck in customs for like a week before Nina's husband could even claim it. Way to go, Nina.
This was Pete's pick from January 2nd, 2015. And in his discussion about that, Pete talked about the cast and focused on Jennifer Aniston, mentioning that he thought she maybe stood a chance for an Oscar for this film. And Andy agreed that she looked amazing in this trailer and agreed that it looked like an opportunity for her to show that she's capable of some powerful performances.
This is the first time that I didn't listen to the actual trailer picks. I didn't get a chance to do that before that. So were there any highlights? What was it up against? Was there anything interesting there?
You know, I just listened to this little clip of it because this was really, I think, even though it's only a little over a year ago, they weren't spending as much time really picking apart their trailers on this one. So there were just a few brief comments on this one. So that's really about all they had to say on that one.
Got it. Interesting. Which show was it on?
That was the January 2nd, 2015, and it was the Poseidon Adventure.
Oh, interesting. So totally a dynamic difference there.
They were in their disaster series or something like that.
Well, I guess there could be some linkage there. This is a disaster.
We're changing it up with this one. I mean, the past two films have been romantic dramas that really had some unconventional structures to them. This is not that kind of film at all. This is really a more straightforward, typical drama. Had a lot of things that felt like those small independent films, smallish cast, really straightforward story. My first question was, is this something that, the other two, Comet and Mr. Nobody, we talked about, the rewatch and going back to find those things. What about the rewatch value of this one?
Well, this was a rewatch for me. So, and the reason why is because you mentioned that either Andy or Pete mentioned that Jennifer Aniston had a chance to win an Oscar for this film. I don't know if she was actually nominated for that. I actually should look that up in IMDb. But my wife and I are members of a number of different unions from the industry. And so we actually received Cake as a part of the nomination for the SAG Awards that she received for it. So I watched it at that time, and I actually watched it ahead of most of the movies that we just mentioned there, Comet, Mr. Nobody, and some of the other things that we'll get into and think about, like Demolition. I saw Cake first before all these, and as in terms of a rewatch, it didn't have any more depth, I guess, than the original story, but the same feelings were there. And Jennifer Aniston's performance is really phenomenal. It's something that's very contrary to her character. In other things she's done, it's really her stepping out of the box, and I think she does a great job of it. And I think that's the real big takeaway for me on this film. There are a lot of really artful things that happen with it as well, and it is a commentary about grief. It's a commentary about tragedy. It's a commentary about pain. And so those things are all interesting if you are into that sort of film, but it is very straightforward. And the biggest thing for me, and even watching it again this time, is really looking at how deep Jennifer Aniston is willing to go. And you really get that when you watch it, even the second time. Yeah,
this is a film that I just watched a couple days ago, but it has really stuck with me. And you mentioned Demolition, and another one of those films where we're looking at characters struggling with the grieving process. And it's compounded because of the chronic pain. But for me, this film really focused on the performance because the story is really simple and straightforward and really sparse. We don't get a lot of exposition. We're dropped right into the story with her at sort of the chronic pain support group. So we don't know why she's there, what the source of the chronic pain is. We slowly get those pieces sort of doled out to us throughout the film. We don't have a lot of exposition explaining this or her monologuing about anything about the past. Everything is very much set in the the present and discussing on what's going on now and how she's dealing with all these people and situations and her sort of emotional response to, sort of the pain that she's in right now.
Yeah, and in that regard, I think it suffers for me as a movie watcher. If you compare it to Demolition, I really enjoy the ability to go along in the story with Jake Gyllenhaal as we discover his grief as well. The sort of discovery of Jennifer Aniston's condition here was tough for me in terms of the story. It put me into, and this might be by design if you look at the way the film is made, but it's to set up a situation where you don't understand her grief, and for a while you don't even understand that it is grief. It's just pain for a long time. So I prefer the way that Demolition went about that. However, it is the same sort of theme of sort of everyone's labyrinth of grief is different, and these were the complications that she had to deal with in figuring out how to go on in her life.
So the basic story to sort of set things up, we've talked about this. So Jennifer Aniston's character of Claire Bennett, we've got this chronic pain. With this small film, it's I guess similar to Demolition. We get this section of her life. This is not the typical, I guess, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 story where things are building towards one sort of big ultimate moment. This isn't the big, inspirational, I'm going to overcome all my challenges and it's going to hit all those key points along the way. It's very, I guess, in a certain way, episodic. You can break it down into specific sort of sections of where we start with her in the midst of her grief and how she sort of moves to the next phases of grief through the film. But it's really very short segments that are somewhat interconnected, but I don't see the traditional one main narrative thread carrying us all the way through with the film. And I think that's one of the challenges of a smaller film like this, where it's very character driven. It's here's Claire in this situation. So here's Claire at, with her breakdown at the support group where she just basically tells everybody off. It's sort of, I guess, triggered by the suicide of one of the members in their support group, Nina, who is played by Anna Kendrick, who appears to Claire it's multiple times throughout the story. We can maybe come back to whether those are key moments or what's going on. But that's sort of the instigating event at the beginning of the film, because it's perhaps pushing Claire a little bit more into where she needs to go in her story. But we get scenes with, she finds out where Nina's husband is. We've got scenes with Claire and her housekeeper and their quest to find drugs, because clearly Claire is way beyond the regular dosage and prescriptions that she should be on because of this chronic pain. So we've got these different little episodes that I sort of see as a collage of Claire's pain and grief.
Yep. A collage of pain is a great way to talk about this film. And you mentioned character driven. That is what this is. The story is there, and there's a purpose to the story, but this is really about the character and how the audience can relate to the character, how the audience takes in the pain and grief of what Claire is going through. And
so Claire's not a very likable person at the beginning of the film. So why do we, as an audience, why do we go along this journey with her? What is it that I guess draws us into her story?
At which point? I have to ask at which point, because I think the film does the job of endearing us to Claire through her story throughout. But at the beginning, I hate to say it, but I think it's because it's Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So so the audience will give Jennifer Aniston a good 10 or 15 minutes to sort of see where she's going to go, even though she's
cheering for Rachel Green.
You are always cheering for Rachel Green, even if she's coming off as just this really obnoxious, just an angry person. Manipulative.
Everything. Yeah.
Even. Right? Because, yes.
They called her in the film.
Yes. So things start to shift, though.
Right.
So we've got the Nina incident that's sort of at the beginning of the story. So I guess the first transition that I start to see happening is when she tracks down Nina's husband Roy, played by Sam Worthington. Right. So it's sort of her first attempt to really reaching out to someone else outside of the support group that she's basically been asked not to return to, her, her housekeeper that she just basically is, it's her person to do what she wants her to do. It's a very commanding, relationship. Sylvana, go take me here. Sylvana, go take me here. Go do this. Go do this. When she meets Roy, it's a very different interaction that's going on.
Sure, it's a different support. Yeah,
a different type of support. So she manages to find out Roy's address, goes to the house, doesn't tell Roy who she is. She comes up with a story that, she used to live there. Roy lets her in. She, basically tours the house saying it's her childhood home. And then upon leaving, Roy reveals, he knew she was lying all along and wanted to see how long she was going to go on with this game.
Would he give her points for execution, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. Points for execution, which I thought set up an interesting dynamic with of sort of how he's dealing with his grief. Because here you've got somebody intruding on his life. He's going through this grieving process. He's just lost his wife, and his wife was suffering from chronic pain, but we don't know why. We don't know the story.
Yeah, they never talk about that, do they?
They never
don't reveal that.
So, and they've got a child together. She left. She committed suicide. Jumped off an overpass on the highway. So Roy's going through that grief, and here, Claire just shows up in his house for her own purposes, which is to find out more about Nina.
Yeah, and that purpose is unclear. That's part of that labyrinth of grief there again.
Well, I think part of it is, at a certain point, Claire is wondering if she has the courage that Nina had to go through with just ending the pain. Because there's a scene at the rehab center in the pool where she grabs a bunch of the weights and jumps into the pool.
It's a suicide attempt.
A suicide attempt, yeah, and can't do it. And I think it's that, what is it that Nina had, or what was going on with Nina's life that she had that ability to follow through that Claire doesn't?
Right.
And so that's the one thing I can really see is that connection that she has with Nina of sort of speaks to what type of person she truly is. Is she somebody that has maybe the strength of will to go through with a suicide or not?
Hi.
Hi.
I really didn't think I'd see you again.
I have to get something off my chest.
Okay.
I am in a lot of pain.
I know.
You may know, but sometimes I suspect that you think I'm this uncooperative old bitch who's just making all of this up.
Do you want to get better? Really? Do you want to?
I do.
Well, and as you're talking about this, it's reminding me of another movie which I think is the same year, which is Birdman, and if you're talking about courage or conviction when we're talking about suicide, it's an interesting language to use about it. But you think about Nina, the apparition, the Anna Kendrick apparitions that show up, or hallucinations that show up, and what part of Claire, what part of Jennifer Aniston's character is bringing that to her, whether it's the drugs or whether it's the suicide, whether it's the depression. And then you compare it against a movie like Birdman, where the insanity, for lack of another word, it just never leaves him. So what is she being tested here? Is she being tested to see how much she loves life or how much she needs release from it? I don't know. I think it's a great question to ask in terms of this, and I think it's purposely left open-ended in this film, and that that alone is one of the great parts of this story, in that they're not trying to tell you, they're just trying to, again, go back to that character-driven thing of, this is Claire, and what is she going to do? How is she going to go through this? How is she going to navigate this in her life?
Yeah, I think that really is the strength, is that it presents these characters in these scenes and leaves it to us to really decide how we're going to take these. It's not presenting us with a specific agenda or point of view or message per se. I think that we can see the journey that she takes, but again, it's giving us this almost very, with just from a outside point of view for us to make our own decisions about. And So if we're going to talk about, this being a really character driven piece, we've talked about Jennifer Aniston. We should probably talk about, because there's some recognizable faces in this film, maybe in an unrecognizable way sometimes, because I had looked at the cast list and I saw, Felicity Huffman and William H. Macy. So I thought, okay, I'll recognize them and we'll see what they bring to this film. This is, going to be really interesting to see having, these actors in this film and what they bring to it, and they have very, very small parts. William H.
Total
Macy,
screen time 2 minutes 10 seconds.
It's William H. Macy. I think it's 30 seconds where Jennifer Aniston basically, pummels and kicks him.
Powerful scene.
But a very powerful scene at a crucial point in the story,
and a perfect cast too. Honestly, it's that is William H. Macy's role in life, is to be that humble, terrible, meek. I'm sorry, but you can't beat up on him enough because he deserves it role. And
even
love that guy. Love that guy.
Oh no, I love that guy, and he brings the William H. Macy-ness to that role in the few seconds that he's there. But being true to this film, still who he is and what he has done is not particularly clear.
No, that's for the viewer. It's in your mind, but it's terrible. I mean, it's clear that whatever he did was terrible.
Oh, he did something, and there was a trial, and he feels horrible and guilty for that, and clearly it's linked to Claire's loss and her, her pain, her emotional pain, and her physical pain, as well. But coming at a key point where she is having lunch with Roy and his son, and it's this sort of starting to heal, being social, and then this comes back. William H. Macy's character Leonard shows up at the door, wanting to apologize for what he has done, and it just, I think, reopens everything up for Claire. Felicity Huffman, who plays Annette, who is the coordinator of the chronic pain support group.
Yep.
We have a couple scenes with her. I think the most memorable is perhaps when Claire is threatening to bring a lawsuit against the group for, I'm trying to think of the exact phrasing, but basically discriminating against her by kicking her out of the group pretty much because they just don't like her.
Right. And she used much better words because she's a lawyer. I mean, Claire is a lawyer in the film, but Felicity did a great job in that. I mean, she was visibly shaken in the way she said, but Claire, but a lawsuit. I mean, I was very impressed with Felicity Huffman.
Yes. And then when Claire later tries to make amends by bringing a very large and expensive bottle of vodka.
That's a great scene.
To Annette, and Annette says, "That's fine, just put it on the floor. Don't come near me. I don't want you anywhere near me. Just put it on the floor. That'll be fine. Thank you."
Yeah, and interestingly about Felicity, so when I watched this the first time, it had been before I had ever worked with her at all. In this last season, I worked with her on American Crime, and she's such a fantastic person, and she's such an entertainer and a leader and just a cast thing. And so now to see her in this role and to think about her in a different way was just awesome for me. She's great, and I think honestly anything she does is awesome. The scene that you're talking about with the vodka, I didn't get it. I didn't understand what the thing was. Inside I was thinking, wait, is she an alcoholic? Is this like an indecent proposal of apology? I don't know. I was overthinking it, but it was great, and the tension was awesome, and the shot, the wide shot looking out at the windows in the dark where Jennifer Aniston puts the vodka, and you've got the separation of the two women. It was just really good stuff. Really, really great film.
There's so many ways that those simple things, I think, are artfully done in a way that really elevates. You've got the experienced, actors that can bring all of that to just a few lines and how they present that elevates this film. But then also you do have the artful presentation, how the scene is presented to us gives us a little bit more about that, gives some emotional weight to it, as we often say, adds that flavor to that, because this is a very simple, straightforward film. It doesn't have a lot of flourishes that draw attention to themselves, but I think just looking at how the film is structured really carries that through.
And I love how you brought up at the beginning of this show about how different it is from the last few movies we've talked about in Trailer Rewind, because there's all this subjective story element in what we've been talking about, and there's really sort of a fourth wall kind of creativity that isn't really here. This is really taking a character driven film and then making it beautiful in terms of the emotion, and it does a good job of that. It's intense. And what does Felicity says at the end of that scene? She says, apology accepted, now leave.
Yes.
And that to me is exactly how this film is. It's very straightforward, emotional, hard hitting, and it's worth seeing for that reason.
Yeah, it is. And I think, we talked about Felicity and William H. Macy, and, minimal screen time for those, but really the film is carried by Jennifer Aniston and then Adriana Barraza, who plays Silvana. It's really the two of them. It's like the most unusual buddy movie you will ever see. Yeah. Because Claire will just take Silvana and just ask the most of her to it's time to go to Tijuana. We're going to go, right. She's out of drugs, and then they get there and the pharmacist starts asking questions and she's like, well, what is this? I thought I didn't need a prescription. And, clearly it's, she's used to having things go a certain way.
Yeah. And Silvana, in that scene, Silvana puts her hand up on the register like, what are you saying? I don't know.
Yeah.
That buddy aspect is always evident when they're on the road together.
Yes. So just, I think to me, that's what really held the film together was the dynamic of their relationship together.
Did you get the sense that Silvana was part of the family before the tragedy? I did. That's
I think so. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Yeah. That she would stay with her because she'd seen what had happened to her to put Claire where she is right now.
Right.
Because I think she wasn't always that way. You mentioned she was an attorney. There was a very brief scene where she's talking in the car, and I think she was a ACLU attorney because they're going to some neighbor. Oh, they're in the car. She's like, "Oh, are we in Orange County right now?" And she has some quite disparaging things to say about the people of Orange County.
Do you only see white people?
Yes.
Then we're in Orange County.
Exactly. So clearly, I think she was an attorney for those that could not represent themselves. Those that, sort of the underdog. So somebody that I think traditionally would be considered someone of a good heart. And then to see where she is now, in my head, Silvana is someone that is sticking with her because she's seen that and knows that she can be that good person.
Yep.
And we start to see her get there, slowly through the film. I think for me, the crucial turning point for me where things start to shift, because it's this very slow transition of Claire just being, mean and demanding, and thought, okay, how long can this go? But I went back and I said, okay, there's a pivot point here. Claire is at the rehab center talking with her physical therapist, and she says, no, she really does want to get better, because we've seen it earlier where it's like, this is too hard, this hurts, you don't understand my pain. And Claire has then turned and is now committed to, she does want to get better.
Yep. Yeah, that was a great turning point. For me, that was definitely, I think the whole film is a really wide circle. It's a really wide turn, right? Like you mentioned, it's very slow. For me, the most emotional turn for me is, this sounds terrible, but when she's lying on the railroad tracks and she does the "I was a good mother."
Oh, yeah.
That thing. It's just, just emotionally speaking. And the music cues through that section, everything was just really opening up the heart to truly accept change. And it was so tense too, with just a very subtle way to make things emotional and tense, and really good, really positive. That sort of long turn that you're talking about.
So after the train incident, so after we've sort of made this turn, they encounter a runaway that Claire invites back to her house, and we think, oh, Claire's now bringing somebody into her home, and has, I think, one demand of her that she requires this girl to bake a cake for her.
Yep.
Which she does, and then proceeds to steal Claire's purse and money and all that. But it doesn't faze Claire, really. She's like, I can cancel my cards, whatever. She takes the cake because it is Roy's son's birthday.
Casey, yeah.
And so so she takes the cake over there, which then comes back to the title of why is this film called Cake?
Yeah, why is this film called Cake?
Because there are two cakes. There's the cake that the runaway bakes, but there's also the cake that, is it Nina?
Oh, Nina brings to her in a drug dream. Yeah.
Yes, and I believe that's right before
it's
Nina
getting the shivers.
Yeah, jumps out the window at the hospital in her hallucination.
Yeah.
Yes. So why cake? What does the cake mean? What does it represent? Is there something that it resonated for you that sort of supported its use as the title? Because I'm thinking back to our discussions about Comet and the use of that word as the title of that film. And as something that I thought about this of like, I mean, first off, what else do you call this film? And I don't come up with a better title, but if you're going to pick Cake, what does that say about Claire, about her story?
Yeah, I don't get it as the title. And when I think about it for the metaphor, I don't know what else I'd call it. So I don't have an answer to that question. But if I think about it for the metaphor, I think, the story that Anna Kendrick, that Nina tells about the question that they were asked in support group, saying, if you did not have pain, if you did not have chronic pain, what's the one thing you would do? And her answer was, I would bake a cake from scratch for my son, Casey. So what does that mean? Asking that question, what does that mean in terms of the pain? So what I would say is that Anna Kendrick, that Nina brings her the cake and then commits suicide in the hallucination, showing that she's never going to be able to do that, because that's when they have that conversation. And I guess this seems awfully simple as a definition for me, but this is what I'm taking from it, in that Jennifer Aniston gets on her mission to have the cake from scratch for Casey because Nina is no longer in pain. Because she did commit suicide. Right. And to say that was Nina's wish. And that might be not fair to the story. That might not be fair to Claire. It might mean something more to her too. But I think her ability to affect that or to make that happen was her tribute to Nina, and allowed her to get off the ghost of Nina and to move on into her own grief.
Right.
That's where I'm taking it.
No, and I think that makes sense. She's able to really resolve whatever sort of issues she's had that have caused these appearances of Nina to come to her. It's a way of, she's able to move past that, and then gets us to sort of the final shot in the film, which my wife and I discussed quite a bit after the film, because throughout this movie, you've got Claire who's just in tremendous amount of pain, and she is a passenger in the vehicle, always in a reclined position. And early on, we see that she's lecturing Silvana about which street she's on, and it's clear that Claire knows which streets have less potholes and bumps, because it appears that jarring motion of the vehicle causes her a lot of physical pain.
Right.
However, the final scene of the film, she sits up.
Yep.
Finally, before they leave. And so first instinct is, okay, she's mentally, in a place where she's overcoming her pain, the physical pain. But then my wife brought up a point. She said, well, I think there might be more to this. And she said, because we just get flashes of what happened. And I think we can piece together there was some type of automobile accident. And is it that Claire is in a reclined position because she can't bear to be upright in the car to see what's coming at her?
Right. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, that she's now in a place where she's ready to sort of face the future and move forward, rather than being in this passive reclined position and sort of looking at things askance from the side, rather than head on and taking on life head on.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I took it. Is there another way to look at it?
No, I think it's either that, or you're taking it as just, I'm sitting up because I'm going to gut it out and get through my pain, and I'm making progress in dealing with my physical pain. But I think there is much more. It was the way, I guess, that final shot is what I expected from this film, of, that close up on Claire, looking at the camera, because the film has been about her, to see her actually take sort of control of her life. There's been a lot of things that have happened, and she's ready to move to that next phase.
Right. And you know what? It's interesting. We had a user post on our Facebook or one of our audience folks, one of our followers, pasted on our Facebook this week about the first shot, last shot. There's a reel, there's a YouTube video out there that shows a bunch of first shot, last shots things. And for a film like this, I'm going to it right now to take a look and see who had done that. For a film like this, it's really interesting to think about because that last shot is so important, so pivotal to the movie. I'm trying to remember what the first shot was. Do you remember the first shot?
I know they're in the support.
Was it her sitting in the chair?
It's her sitting in the chair at the support group. Yeah,
that's what I thought too. So I don't know that the first shot is as interesting as the last, but the last is so key to this. I think it's really interesting when you try to put that bookend in context.
Yeah. So we spent a lot of time talking about the cast. I think we should, we should give some credit to Patrick Tobin for writing this because I think this could have easily been the, I guess, typical independent film that's taking on an important issue and trying to say too much with it. And I think, Patrick showed a lot of restraint with the script of this in terms of the amount of information we get and really trusting the audience to piece things together or allowing them to bring their own sort of meaning to this film instead of giving us everything to set up already for us. That there's a lot of, I think, work that the audience can do with this film and give you a lot of questions to ask yourself. And I want to give him credit.
I think he deserves it, and I always love when they give the audience credit for that. I think, I mentioned before that I think I like the way that Demolition did it better, but I admire the courage of a writer to show and not tell what's happening with the character as it goes. And, again, just for me, the way I looked at it, I appreciated the knowledge in Demolition, but I think this is a really strong choice. And I really believe that he deserves credit for building the story in that way. And
then our director, Daniel Barnes, who's done a couple other films. One of them was another that Phoebe in Wonderland was on Netflix forever and was always in my queue of something I wanted to get around to see, but never got to see. So now, having seen Cake, I'm like, makes me a little bit more likely to watch Phoebe in Wonderland as one of those films that, of the 50 that may be sitting in a queue of like, yeah, maybe I'll get around to it. Feeling the artfulness and craft that he put into Cake makes me more likely to go back and explore some of his earlier work.
That, I think it's well done. It's well directed. And as I'm going through the cast and crew here now too, I'm seeing that actually the cinematographer on it is Rachel Morrison, who was the director of photography for the episode of American Crime that I worked on with Felicity Huffman last year, which is awesome. Okay. And she's fantastic. Love working with her. She's super awesome, super up and comer, great creativity. And the reason why I wanted to bring her up, in addition to the director, is because there was a point in the film, one of my favorite shots, where when Claire comes to and sees the gift from her husband of returning the picture of her and her son to the spot above the couch, saying that he belongs here, I think is the word that he is going to post it.
Yes.
And we follow Claire to the sofa as she witnesses the picture from afar. We follow her to the sofa in sort of a close-up near screen. And I'm sitting there as an audience member and as a camera operator thinking to myself, hey, all I want to see is the flat shot of Claire on the couch with the picture behind her. That's what I want next. And that's what I want. And both the director cut it, the editing, the director, they cut it, and Rachel had it shot, and it was perfect. And one of my favorite shots of the film, and I already mentioned the vodka shot. There's a number of those that are great. The underwater shot of Claire floating in the pool. It's great stuff. Yeah. And I would watch anything that Rachel does because I think she's that good. And I think if you're a fan of that sort of aspect of film, of the film work in film, this is a character-driven piece that shows off some really great talent in Hollywood as well.
Well, it's time to discuss our flick chart rankings on this one.
That's awesome. Did you already rank it?
I have already ranked it.
Okay. You go first. Tell me where you go first.
So this one came in at number 66 on my flick chart of... Where am I? I'm at 183 movies. So 66.
So it's in the upper half. That's great.
Oh, yeah. So it landed in between, because we talk about usually where it falls in between. This is really interesting because it came up against both of these to settle in this place. So it came just below Kingsman, The Secret Service.
Oh, okay.
And just above Ghost World.
So that's interesting. Did you have to pit those against each other at all?
Yeah, it came up against Ghost World, and I put it above that, and then it came up against Kingsman,
and then it
fell below that because Kingsman's just the fun.
It's in
of
my top
that.
5.
Yeah.
So now for you, how do you feel about that? 66 out of 183. Is that a good spot?
Yes, because it's a film that, it sat with me, and it kept sort of churning and thinking about this film. So it's not one that I watched and walked away from and forgot about. Something like that I wouldn't expect to be that high if it's forgettable. This is one I don't know that I'll come back and revisit it a lot, but I think really in terms of the weight that it carried and the story that it told, it's in a well-deserved spot there.
Yeah, totally. And and so here's the reason I laughed or was excited to talk about Flickchart on this is because it's in my bottom half, and I don't necessarily feel it belongs there. But I think we talked about last month when we did Mr. Nobody that I have a really tough blocker in the middle.
You do,
Pete and Andy had talked about how they had their Oh Brother blocker for so long.
Yes.
I have True Romance.
Oh, that's
right in the middle for me. And
Yeah.
It's totally unfair. Honestly, so every time I do Flickchart on my personal Flickchart, I have to have that thing like, how do you compare Cake to True Romance? But anyway, so I picked True Romance in that, so it put it in the bottom half. So right now, Cake is in the spot of 80 out of 116, which. So it's between Syriana, so it's below Syriana, and but it's above Born Legacy.
Oh, okay.
And I think if I look at it on a smaller scale, I think that's a good spot for it. But if I try to look at it from the whole perspective, I think it belongs higher than that. It is a more powerful film than that. It's just the way that Flickchart sets you up. Sometimes you have to make tough choices.
Yeah, sometimes you get those blocks. Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah, and Born Legacy, that's relevant to us too. Talking about where we're going from here on out.
I was just going to say, now that we rewound, we can fast forward to what's coming up on the next reel. Pete and Andy are continuing their disease series, and I'm really looking forward to some of the films. And they've got this it wasn't planned, and I don't want to say secret, but it's this unintentional Julianne Moore double feature because the series includes both Children of Men and Blindness.
And I love Children of Men. I'm so excited they're going to do that.
Love both those movies. And then, as you brought up, near the end of this month, Film Board's going to be taking on Jason Bourne. So time to revisit all your Bourne films. And I know that Pete has mentioned a couple months ago he took a knife skills class, so maybe he might have a chance against Jason Bourne.
Like throwing knives?
No, a knife in the kitchen. In the kitchen, but Matt Damon with a pen, Pete with a knife. Pete might come out alive.
Maybe if he's working with Aaron Cross.
Maybe. Justin, it's been a great pleasure talking with you tonight. I think I'm going to go grab a piece of cake.
Yes. Tasty. Go get some.